Alright, welcome to another painting tutorial. This one we're going to look at the Imperial Knight. So I painted up as the Adaptus Mechanicus colors, and here we are with the paints. You can check out my blog to see all those. Here's a size comparison. There's a bunch more pictures on my blog. You can see a couple different size comparisons as well as the whole painting guide. So I started off by base coating it with a kind of a dark gray color, and here I am airbrushing some white on all the areas that are going to turn out red. So just kind of priming them. The red will be a little bit brighter. So I'm using Vallejo white. This is the Model Air. Yeah, it's just plain white, nothing special to it. I use a couple Vallejo Model Air paints here just because they're pre-mixed, thinned down, and ready to go. So I'm putting on some masking strips here. What I want is I want to have the red sort of on those edges of the carapace, and going to do the hazard stripes sort of in the middle part there. So doing the base coat of red here, and trying to get a nice even color there. It's this is a Badger airbrush paint again, so it's pre-mixed, but you could use Citadel paints or whatever you have. You just need to water it down to the right consistency for your airbrush. Okay, so working along there, and base coating, yeah, the rest of the carapace pieces. So it's basically all of the armored bits, half the shoulder pads, half of the shin pads, knee pads, that sort of thing, and some of the weapon stuff. Okay, so now after base coating it with my non-GW paint, I'm base coating it here with Evil Sun's red, just to try to get a nice even red color that I can recreate using Citadel paints if I have to go back and touch anything up. So just making sure the tones of everything are all exactly the same. Okay, and then trying to get some highlights on there with Wild Rider Red. And again, the idea here isn't to get super highlights, it's just to get a bit of variation on the colors and make it look a little bit worn or highlighted or whatever. So just working from the edges there, giving a bit of a glow on things, and then I'm going to be doing lots of weathering on this, so most of this won't really be that noticeable at the end of it all. The main idea with the airbrush is to get a head start on all the base coating, all the big flat surfaces, and help get them looking a little bit better. Okay, so masking off the sides there of the carapace so that I can get my black base coats on, and just going to spray those on the side there. It's just a nice even black base coat, and trying not to get any overspray onto the red bits. Okay, so now I'm using some another Badger base coat paint here, just a yellow, plain yellow, just to get a nice even coat there. So I've masked off all my red so it's protected. And you want to make sure that whatever tape you're using won't pull up your paint. I had a little bit of problems, partly because I probably didn't protect the layers in between. But I'm using Tamiya paint or tape here, so it's a low tack masking tape that's meant for painting with. You could also use things like those green painter's tapes or Scotch tape. Depends how much paint you're putting on. You got to experiment on different things to find out what works with the paints you have and the thicknesses you like to work with. So going over everything with Flash Gets Yellow to bring it up to a nice bright yellow, and highlight the different sort of panels on there. And again, with airbrushing, you always want to go on nice and thin on things. I'm using a post-it note here to sort of highlight some of the edges of the panels. The reason a post-it's nice is because they're throwaway and a little bit of tack to them, so they won't pull up the paint, but they will stick to the surface a little bit. Okay, now I'm using an orange color here just to shade the edges of things, so I'm painting mostly on the tape and then just trying to pull the shading towards the edge there, and working my way around everything, doing a little bit of shading on some of the knee pads, and again using a post-it note there to get my tonal variation just on some of the flat surfaces, just to help bring out some depth to those panel lines. Most of this you won't really notice once the hazard stripes are on there, but it does help a little bit. Okay, now we're going to move over to some black stripes. So I've masked off the top of that carapace there, as well as the knee pad. So just going to spray on that nice and lightly. It's better to do a couple thin coats rather than one thick coat with the airbrush, because you'll get bleeding underneath the tape if you're not careful. As well, you get some ridges when you pull the tape off. Okay, so just again spraying nice and thin there, trying to get everything from an angle perpendicular to it. You try to push the tape in around all the contours as best you can, but you're going to get some spray underneath that, especially if you're using a higher pressure air. Okay, using some dark Reaper there to highlight things. Actually, that looks like Thunderhawk turquoise, but from the background there. Sorry. So yeah, just highlighting up some of those panels, making the black a little bit less black, a little bit more gray, and doing the same with some other stuff. So here I'm experimenting using a paint marker to do all the shoulder pads and stuff. I did a little bit of airbrushing with the silvers on there, but I found that this worked kind of okay, but then I had to go over everything with paint anyways, so just it was a thought that might work, but it helped a little. Okay, painting some of the joints there with dark Reaper, and that's going to get washed with some of my black colors, and we'll be good to go. Warplock bronze for any of the goldish colors there, and I'm going to be touching that up with Hashoot copper and stuff. The main idea with all my silvers here that I did in the painting is painting them kind of the base color, dry brushing them a bit, and then using oils to wash them all. So I'll show you that in a minute. So Runefang steel, I wanted the edges of all these carapace to be nice and bright, nice bright silvers. So that's why that's getting Runefang, and then it'll just be weathered a little bit with the oil paints and some powders. Okay, Euthian gray for the edges of those hazard stripes, so that's just to help bring a bit of contrast, to sharpen up the edges there. So it's just a nice thin line of that gray, and then I'll highlight it up with a bit of white. Okay, and then after that, I'm doing some Agrax Earthshade on that copper bronze color there, and mostly just to get those sort of the holes on it to look darker and look like the end or whatever. Okay, and so here I am using Hashoot copper to bring up that color, for kind of painting the whole flat surface of everything with that. And I can do the same with all the joints, pins that I've used that copper color. Okay, here I am using microset on the shoulder pads for adding decals. So I put a gloss coat on first here to get everything nice and smooth. I kind of wet the surface with that microsol, and it's basically a decal softening liquid, and then use the paintbrush to put the decal on in place, kind of pat it down, get it positioned exactly where I want it, using a little bit of different techniques. So these decals are cut pretty close, but not perfectly close to the edge, so you may want to go in and cut those a little bit closer so they mesh right up to the edge of that shoulder pad. Then I use micro set to adhere them to the whole the contours there, and those decals are really nice, probably some of the best ones GW has made to date. I found that they form really nicely and all that. So here I am using an oil wash. So this is just a artist oil black and some mineral spirits, and going over the whole model to give it a nice oily sort of a look. It works very similar to Newland oil, but because it's an oil paint, it goes into the cracks really nicely. You just have to make sure you put a nice gloss coat, acrylic gloss coat on first, so something like Pledge floor polish is really good for that. And here I am just using some weather powders that I have just to get some different colors in there, some dirt and dust along the bases of things. I used the soot on the front of the gun to make it look like it was kind of blackened. I did the same thing on the top of the exhaust ports. And yeah, using some lighter stuff now just to get some dusty bits here, there, and everywhere. A lot of this kind of goes away when you put a dull coat on it, so you may want to put this on after the dull coat as well. You know, if you're using the oil washes and you don't like the glossy look, all you do is you put a dull coat on everything, so a matte finish. Tester's dull coat is one I like to use, or there's some Krylon matte finishes out there that are inexpensive and work just as well. Doing a little bit of rust here and there everywhere just to give the idea that this thing is old and a little bit worn. And that's basically it. Going to give this a spray of the dull coat, like I mentioned. And here's the paints. These will all be over on my blog. You can check that out. They'll be in the description below. And if you have any questions, feel free to post a comment here or over on my blog. And I'm happy to tell you any techniques that I might have skipped over. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. There's lots more on my channel. Be sure to subscribe and share them around. All these still images are on my blog, so be sure to check those out as well. See you next time.